Welcome back to your professional diploma in digital marketing and SEO. Today we continue with our topic of Google Analytics. What we're covering today, we are looking at top analytics reports. It's a continuation of the previous lesson. Then creating audiences. Then we will move on to creating filters before closing off with custom dashboards. Right, so let us jump in. We have acquisition reports, and the reason why I closed off on goal setup and event tracking in the last lesson is because you need that in place for any of these acquisition reports to be of value to you. This is the overview of the acquisition report. You can see the top channels that people have come from, the number of users, the e-commerce conversion rate in this case, because we are still using the Google Merchandise Store, and then a breakdown of the different channels that you have acquired these users from. This is a really quick and easy way to tell which channels are performing for you and which aren't. You can also compare it to a previous date range to see if there are any major changes. So it is literally an overview. Then some important things to remember about your acquisition reports to make sure you get the most of them is, of course, as I mentioned, to set up those goals and use consistent conventions, naming conventions, so that when you're analyzing something, when you're pulling the data so that you can do reporting, you know exactly what's going on, and so does analytics. It just makes things easier overall. Then you need to try and link these services to Google Analytics, Google Ads, of course, for campaign information, and Search Console for website and SEO purposes. You would have seen that these options appear under the audience section of all the reports. If we go back to our acquisition reports and look at all traffic and channels, that is how all the steps to access this report. You can see on the left here that these are our dimensions. So we have the different channels that Google is using at the moment. Organic being the top one in terms of volume at least, followed by direct. Then if you look right over to the end where we have conversions and e-commerce, you can actually see that organic search has a very, very low conversion rate, but direct has a high or higher conversion rate, to be expected because people are visiting the site through direct means. Referral is clearly not working for them at the moment. Paid search, that has also got quite a high conversion rate, and then other, so we don't know what that is, that has the highest conversion rate. Unfortunately, not much we can do about that. We could, however, decide to focus more on paid search, for example, put more budget into that, do away with affiliates, and try and boost organic results with SEO. Once again, though, this is quite a broad overview of what's going on. It's good to see if there are any major changes, especially if you are comparing different date ranges. Remember what I said, though, when we were covering analysis in the first lesson of this module. You need to make sure that when you are comparing on date ranges, that you're comparing apples to apples. So if you have the last 7 days that you're looking at, try and compare it to the same days of the week in the previous month, just so that you're getting a more accurate idea of what's happening, with your site. To look at a week is not always the best example, although it's good to check if there are any major changes, because then you might pick up, things, I have to change budget or I have to do this. But generally, looking at a longer date range is recommended. So what's more useful is to look or add a secondary dimension to this report. And in this example, I have used source medium, and this is where UTMs come in and why they are so useful. So in the previous report, we were just looking at channels. So we had no differentiation between, let's say, organic and paid traffic. So in this report, you do. And just so you can see or make sure that you're seeing this, this is where you would choose the secondary dimension. You could also just look at source, medium, keyword, which won't work for everything because there are only some channels that have that keyword targeting. And then there are other options as well. Okay, so we have the source medium. So we can see that what's bringing the most amount of traffic is organic. However, it has one of the lowest e-commerce conversion rates. But because it's not traffic that you are paying for, of course you could focus on SEO, as I mentioned in the last one, but here you might actually then decide to focus on conversion rate. So you would then look at the different pages, which we will be looking at shortly. Of the top conversion rate channels or mediums, we have the not set one, again, unfortunately. Then we have Google CPC, that's second highest, direct, and then organic. Then within the acquisition section, there is also a social section, and this is the overview that you will be able to see. It's looking at the number of conversions. So how much revenue can be attributed to social. We have this on the right here, which is looking at the number of sessions from social, the sessions via a referral from social, the number of conversions that social contributed to, which we'll talk about just now, and then the last interaction social conversions. Firstly, no linking is required, which is fantastic. If Google Analytics recognizes the social network, and it does that by URL, it will be added to your social report, so you don't even have to worry about that. But because this is all about acquisition, goals need to be set up in order to correlate how social contributes to these goals. Then just to explain the difference between the different conversions, we have assisted conversions, which means that a user visited your site from social, but also from other channels. So it's not solely responsible for that conversion. Then there are last interaction conversions, which is a user that converted on your site, but the last channel she came from is then credited with the conversion. So the social network in this case, because it is the social report. So any conversions that happened with the last click being from social, then the social report will show it. When it comes to performance marketing, we don't really care about vanity metrics. We care about conversions. We care about revenue, the bottom line. So what is it nice to look at in terms of social is the conversions report. Now, you can either sort it by the conversion total or assisted versus last interaction. So you would get, a breakdown per network, how many assisted conversions and how many last interaction conversions. If we look at this example here, we can see that YouTube is the top converting channel by far. Okay, look, volume is low, but let's just add some extra zeros onto those numbers. YouTube is the top performing channel. So then from here you might decide, okay, I'm going to create more video content, or I'm going to use some YouTube video ads, or at least banner ads that appear with YouTube videos, etc. What does need a bit of extra code in terms of social is if you look on the left at the report breakdown, you have the conversions, and then underneath that is plugins. Now these are buttons that you've put on your site. For example, a tweet button or a Pinterest pin button or Facebook share, etc. So in order to track what's happening with those, you do need to put some extra code, but it is quite straightforward, a lot more straightforward than event tracking. So it is definitely something to do if you choose to utilize those on your site. Now we are going to look at some behavior reports, which are very interesting. Here is where you would see it within the Google Analytics profile. This is the overview. So every report has an overview, and the default is that it's showing us page views. We'll be looking at behavior flow a bit later, as well as some reports in site content. Site speed is all to do with that. Site search is referring to if you have a search functionality on your site, so people can search for things, then you'd be able to see what those searches were. Events, you remember hopefully from the last lesson, this is where you would see the different events that you've created. Publisher is to do with AdSense or Ad Exchange. So you're literally a publisher that sells ad space, for example, on a website or your blog. And it provides metrics based on this, as of course this generates revenue for you. So you get paid for selling that inventory. On that note though, AdSense used to be a lot more lucrative, but now not so much. So I think that's why many people have turned to other options like Patreon, for example. And then experiments is where you would view your experiments. So if we go back to the overview, you can see at the top there's a graph of page views, which you can also compare with another metric. If you then move or look down to the site content and then the different pages, it's to be expected that the homepage would have the most amount of page views. And then you can go into whatever page you want to have a look at in more detail. And that is where we come to the site content or pages report. And this is where you get the different metrics, more information than the overview can provide. Now, this section can help you identify several things. For example, which pieces of content keep visitors on your site for the longest and with more pages per session. Which pages bring you the highest conversion rate? Which pages have the highest bounce rate, because then that would be something to look into. All of this can help you either produce more content that has a higher chance of performing. It can assist also with changing your paid media strategy in terms of what gives the highest conversion rate. Now, I know it ends off here with 10 results, but this is the maximum number of fields that it will show. You can actually choose to show up to, I think it's 500. So there are definitely more than 10 pages on this site. If you look at the top here, you can see that you can also change the primary dimension from page to page title, to content grouping. And this is something that you would set up, as in, let's say you have multiple pages that are talking about the same topic. You put it all in one group, and then you can analyze it with just in that group. Then within the site content section, also still under behavior, you have landing pages. It might not be very helpful on its own, but if you add a secondary dimension, I've added traffic type here, then you can actually get more information. Using traffic type as the example, you could then group all the organic results together and see what performs the best or the worst compared to all the other groups. So referral, direct, affiliate, etc. For advertising purposes, you could see which pages have the highest bounce rate, the lowest conversion rate, the lowest time on site. There are various different things that you can look at with these landing pages. And then you also have exit pages. And it's important to remember that bounce rate and exit pages are not the same thing. Bounce rate, as you know, I'm hoping, is coming to a page and not visiting any other page and just disappearing, just bouncing off the page. Exit page is where a person exited your site. So they may have seen six or may have visited 6 different pages, but the exit page is what would appear here. So the last page that they visited before they went away from your site. The thing with this is that you can't always assume that a high exit rate is a negative thing. It's actually quite standard for there to be quite a high percentage, in certain pages, especially when it comes to e-commerce. It's important to remember that this might not actually have anything to do with converting or not. People visit your site for multiple reasons. Some people visit multiple times before converting. So just tearing down a page or changing it completely just because it has a high exit rate is not the best approach. You need to look at it from a usability perspective. What are people doing? Taking your customer journey and just finding out whether there is actually a problem with that page. Then we have behavior flow, which is very interesting. This tells you what people or how, in what order people visit your site. If we're looking at landing page as an example, And then we start here with the starting pages. So the bulk of it is not set. But after that page, or those pages, their first interaction, so the next page, what was that? Then the second interaction, so again, the page after that, the third interaction, etc. You can add more steps on. This is looking at all users. It would probably be a good idea to compare that to your converting people to see if the same kind of pattern is happening. You can choose from many different dimensions in terms of the drop down where it says landing page. And you can also highlight traffic or view one specific segment, which I'm going to show you now. But just to show you in terms of the different dimensions, so here I changed it to source medium. So now we have our Google organic, direct, analytics, etc. All those different sources and the interactions as a result or from those sources. Now, if I clicked the Google Organic section, I would see options either to highlight the traffic through here. So that's what's happening at the moment. All the traffic from Google Organic is being highlighted, whereas the others are kind of grayed out. Or you could view that segment alone. And this is what it would look like. And this is where then you could really start to have a look at the different interactions that are happening. For example, the starting pages here, I know it's not set, but let's just say it was the home page. The red line that you can see is the percentage of people that have dropped off from this page. And you can see the actual number above that where it says starting pages. So there were 6,600 sessions to this page, but 6,300 dropped off. This is another great report to compare in terms of date ranges. If there's a big difference in exit rates, then that tells you that it's a page that you need to look at. It is incredibly normal for there to be a high amount of drop off. Even if you have your targeting 100%, it does happen. So if you see a big red line, it's not a time to panic and think that you're doing everything wrong. It's just keeping an eye on it then and seeing if it increases or decreases and more. Obviously now with the different interactions, where you can add steps, it would be very helpful in terms of e-commerce because there are generally multiple pages to go through to analyze that flow and see where people are dropping off and therefore how the experience could be improved. That is something that we will look into a little bit when we cover e-commerce. But yes, just important to know that on its own, it can't do much, but with other information and going more into the detail of it, so looking at each segment on its own, then you can find out more information, more actionable information. So we have finished with analytics reports for now, at least in this lesson, and we're going to be looking at creating audiences. Now again, audiences or creating audiences would be available through accessing the admin section of your analytics account. And then they are called audience definitions. What you would first see would be the standard audience definitions, which are very good to add kind of by default. Perhaps not the users who visited a specific section of my site, at least initially, unless you have something that you really want to be monitoring. Again, very handy in e-commerce. Then users who completed a goal conversion, whether that's a lead or it's event tracking or events that you have chosen to add as a goal in analytics. And then of course, if you have an online shop or you're uploading your transaction data, which is called offline conversion tracking and is quite advanced, so we're not going into that now, but you would add that if you are an e-commerce site and you have that revenue data available. Of course, you then give it a clear name, but what you can also do with audiences, and I did mention it earlier and in the last lesson, is you can import different segments to use as an audience. So if you see as an example here, you've got bounced sessions, converters, made a purchase, multi-session users. There's a ton of options. So just like I mentioned, you could create an audience based on time on site. This is where you would do that. This is the time on site is the segment that you would choose to import. You can also do something that is essentially building an audience. If you look on the left here, you can see the different options. You've got demographics, technology, referring again to the different devices that they're on, the operating systems, etc. The behavior, or the date of the first session, as well as traffic sources. So you might want to create an audience that only comes from Google CPC, so PPC, your search campaigns. Then you could save an audience based on that. What you would do is you would set conditions. So you can see in this example, I've just chosen a page contains our services. You don't have to type this out. This will actually appear automatically once you start or once you've clicked in this box, and then you can choose from any of the options. So this is conditions. This is basically the set of rules that Google needs to follow in order to add people to this audience. But then you also have sequences, which is more complex, definitely. And it's about you providing the sequence in which someone on your site does something in order for it to qualify as part of this audience. Let's say you are an e-commerce site and you think you have a very clear idea of what your customer journey looks like. Then what you would do, or you could do here, you could create the sequence of events. So the steps that people follow in order or before converting. And just as the name suggests, it is sequential. So it would be step 1 is followed by step 2 is followed by step 3. So anyone who doesn't follow these steps to the T would not be included in the audience. So let's say you completed your setup and you chose apply, then you would see this information here. But what I want you to focus on is this bit of information on the right. So it estimates or tells you how many users you've had over the last 7 days that have fit that audience or the audience that you are creating. Then you have your membership duration, which in this case is referring to any of your site visitors who have visited your site within the last 30 days. What is a good idea to do is to create separate audiences with different membership durations. Generally, when I was doing this, I would create 30, 60, 90, 180. There are various strategies that you could implement based on this. It depends on the business completely, but let's say someone is due for an annual renewal of their subscription. If you have a list of 180 days or 360 days, then you could remind them or send them communication, advertise them to them based on that, on their membership duration. Then with eligibility, this is exactly that. It's where these audiences would be eligible to show, to run. So in this case, it's Google Display and RLSA, which is remarketing lists for search ads. Google Analytics, of course, and then in this case, there's an external partner, which is Salesforce. You would then name your audience and go to the next step, where you would then publish your audience to the different platforms that are shown in the eligibility section. Even if you're not going to use them, still publish them there because one day you might. And just note that analytics is in there. Even though you're creating the audience with analytics, you need to publish it to Google Analytics as well. Okay, so we are getting to filters now. And let me just explain what a filter is. It's a way to change or limit the data that you see in a view. Some common filters are excluding internal traffic, so any traffic that's coming from yourself or your employees, so that it's not skewing the data. Removing spam and bot traffic, which I will give more info on just now. And then you might want to combine data for multiple versions of the same page. If we think about that thank you page example, there were 2 versions. Now, if I included them both together, I would get data, in one go for both of those pages. They're exactly the same. They just have a different URL structure. So filters can kind of fix that. You would find where to create filters in the same section as the view section within the admin area. So if you selected create a filter, this is what you would see. Of course, a name, Then there are predefined or custom filters. Filter verification, so just like with the goal setup, you can verify the filter as well. However, it doesn't always work with filters, so just be careful. And an important thing to know is that filters do not work retroactively. So in terms of adjusting or changing the data, it'll only work from the day that you created the filter. It won't change any of the data prior to that. And that is one of the reasons why it's important to try this out in your sandbox view as opposed to your master view. So let's go through some examples, starting with excluding traffic. This is a predefined filter type. Then from the drop-down, I chose traffic from the IP addresses. Then you can also select your expression. So it's equal to a certain IP address, begins with a certain number or numbers, ends with certain numbers, or that contain certain numbers. This is about excluding internal traffic, but to be honest, this method really does depend on your IT in terms of how it was set up. So it depends if you have a static or dynamic IP. A static IP is something that doesn't change, and that's easier then to manage in terms of this filter, or a dynamic IP, in which case a regex or regular expression would need to be implemented after talking to your IT person, and then you could set up something in terms of the expressions that either contain, many IP addresses remain the same, in terms of the first three numbers at the beginning or at the end. But the problem here is that you could potentially be excluding other traffic. So it really is better if you have a static IP. If you don't know what your IP is, you can search "what is my IP" on Google and it will tell you. Or you might need to contact your IT technician. Or if you don't have one, a friend who knows IT. And then just confirming that regex, regular expressions, they are used for more complex filtering, and we are touching on those briefly just now. Then if we move on to excluding bots and spam, there is no foolproof way. These things are so clever and built so well that you just can't catch them all sometimes. However, the first thing to do when you are setting up your view is at the bottom here, you can see on the right it says bot filtering. Exclude all hits from known bots and spiders. This will cover some of them, but not all of them. And the reason why this doesn't work for everything is because the bot filtering only excludes known bots. There are ghost bots that don't even visit the site. What they do is they ping random Google Analytics IDs and then basically mess with them. I don't fully understand it all, but essentially their traffic or their sessions appear on the site, but they were actually never there to begin with. Then you also have undeclared bots, and they are as a result of bad design, or they were built for criminal purposes. These ones are the hardest to get rid of. The steps that I'm going to take you through don't necessarily cover all of these. It takes a lot of in-depth technical knowledge to deal with these guys. So in order to minimize the activity from these bots would be to view the host names, and you would access this under audience, then technology, and then network. The host name is essentially the full domain name, and it's hard for a bot to fake, particularly with bots that are calling random properties, so those ghost bots. It's just harder for them to fake a legitimate domain name. After accessing this network report, what you would do is you would select the longest date range that you can, so at least a year, unless of course you are younger than a year. Then you would change the dimension from service provider to host name. Of course, your traffic from the valid domains will appear here, but they'll be very obvious things like Google Translate or Amazon or, anything like that. However, anything that looks like this is definitely a bot. These are supposed to be the full domain names, but they absolutely aren't. These look like different IP addresses. And so these are the little bots that you don't want to appear in your reports. So what you would do is you would exclude your bots and your spam with something, as we've mentioned, called regular expressions. The first thing that you need to do is take note of all the valid host names and write a regex to include only those. For example, your website.com, so your domain name, pipe, googleweblight.com, web.archive.org, and etc. You add, as many of the valid host names as you have. And as I mentioned in the last lesson, the pipe in this regex means or. So essentially, this is going to allow traffic only from these domains. Important to remember as well is that you should not include the www. Again, do this in your sandbox to make sure that you're not messing with things too much. There are a total of 13 regular expressions used to create custom filters. This one would be a custom filter. At the top, of course, include a clear name, for example, excluding bots by host name. It's a custom filter, so you choose that from the filter type. The filter field is the host name. You select that from a drop down. There are many, many options, so you'll have to look for it. But it is there. Then the filter pattern is where you would include that regex that you have written. Then I would recommend anyways just verifying this filter just to see if there is a massive difference in the current traffic that you are seeing. But again, just bear in mind that it is not always accurate. There are many custom filters. I would definitely recommend either creating a new view. So that's actually what you could do. You could create a view where you have excluded the bots and spam and compare that to your master view and see what the difference is. As you can see on the right, there are tons of options in the drop down. Some more filter examples would be by UTM to see campaign or content performance. So you could just filter by that specific either it's the campaign source or medium, so that you only see that information in your view. And then you could also split or filter by location so that you can view performance per market in different views. Again, there will be many different reasons that people would or wouldn't do these filters, but it's good to know that they are available. So there are custom filters, but there are also custom dashboards. Now, custom dashboards are great because if you just want to be able to log into your account and have an overview of exactly what you want to be seeing based on the different criteria or filters or views that you have in place, then a custom dashboard is definitely for you. So what you would do is there is a section called customization under the home button in Google Analytics on the left. You would add a new dashboard, and then essentially it's like building it. You have your different widgets, which is, you would name that whatever you want it to. If it was standard, so the normal reporting, then you could choose whether you want to see it as a metric, a timeline, a geomap, a table, a pie, or a bar. Then you have real time, which is literally who is on your site right now. At any point in time, you can check that and you can see how many people are on your site and what they're doing, what pages they're on. You might want to know that or keep track of that. So choose that, and then again, you have your counter, your timeline, your geomap, or your table. So there's less options there. And then you would choose a metric. So what is the information that you actually want to be seeing? Then you can add a filter. So let's say you only want to see data from your Google campaigns, then that widget would just show that data. And then if you want to be able to link from there to the full report, you could either leave this blank, or if you want to specify or change it, then you could put that there. So just as a quick example, I have added a widget that's called campaign goal completions, paid media only. So that's an example of the metric as well as the filter that I have chosen. So we have the campaign, the number of goal completions, and then the cost per goal conversion. There's no data for this view. I have a different account here, and it's all users, but you can add additional segments and of course move that from there. The segment would then be in the widget, so it would be always on the dashboard, but you can edit these at any time. Some uses for custom dashboards would be content. You could have a content dashboard where you're looking at all the different metrics to do with how your content is performing. So bounce rate, time on site, page depth, engagement, session duration, all of that stuff. Audience, you might want to keep track of their location, gender and age, interests, and more. With conversions, you might want to see your total number of conversions and your cost per conversion, the transactions, the conversion per channel, so many different things. You might also want to create a dashboard just for your campaign, so you're seeing your campaign data. Essentially, almost an unlimited amount of dashboards, and there are some great reasons for trying it, and it does you no harm. It won't change any of the data, so give it a go and see what you think. As I mentioned, segmentation is still enabled and the dashboard can be edited at any time, so it's not set in stone. It's really easy to implement. Then there is a section called Discover, which is really a way for Google to punt all their other products, but there are some useful things in there. This is what it would look like. And just out of interest, this is the Google Analytics demo account link that we covered in module 1. So if you don't have it, and you have a Google Analytics account, check it out under the Discover section. Then this is something really handy. There is a spreadsheet add-on. So I'm not talking about Excel at this point. I'm talking about the Google Sheets. You can have an add-on where you can pull data directly into the Google Sheet. And then of course you can download the app, which is really handy. There's the Analytics Academy if you want to learn more about analytics. It's a great idea to check that out. And you can also set up your custom alerts via here as well, though you can also do it in the admin section. For example, I once set up an alert for a page that if it exceeded a certain bounce rate, then I must get an email to let me know. But there are many others that you can set up. Huge congratulations on completing lesson 4. This is fantastic. Well done again. I will see you very soon for lesson 5. Bye guys.